Good morning, and thank you all for being here today. Our Worksite Wellness Lunch and Learn is an exciting topic today, just how stress and lack of sleep can affect your weight and overall health. There's a defined link between stress and sleep, and right now, before the holidays get rolling into full swing, we're going to share with you some great coping mechanisms on how to deal with stress more effectively, as well as some tips that should help you improve any poor sleeping habits you may have. As you all hopefully know, sleep is so important to our overall health. Your health is important to us. We care about you and your health as a state employee, and because of that, we continue to provide these educational yet fun lunch and learns. Our cooking demo today will feature a holiday favorite that you might just want to prepare for your own Thanksgiving or as a homemade gift to someone special. Join me in welcoming our speaker. Most of you know her. It's Katie Godin from Lifestyle Medical Centers. Katie's been a registered dietitian for over 15 years. Her focus is on helping individuals improve their knowledge and relationship with food and to meet their personal health goals. Lifestyle Medical Centers is an in-network nutrition counseling service. For those of you enrolled in the state health plan, virtual and in-person visits are covered at 100% for our in-network providers. We have dietitians across the state, although doing virtual makes it easy for everyone. To find one near you, you can log into the State Health Plan Portal, which is listed on the cover slide. As a reminder, everyone who's registered for this event will receive a recording of today's presentation, as well as the recipes and a link to our webpage, where we house all of our past cooking demos and information about upcoming webinars as well. Please note that we do offer closed captioning for this event. If you're interested, just click on the web link in the Q&A to use this option. During the presentation, you can use the chat box for any questions, and we will answer those as they come in, as well as with Katie during the cooking demo. I'd like to thank the members of NC Flex team who are here to help with questions. Katie saved a few minutes at the end of our event to also conquer any questions that we can't get to through the chat or during the cooking demo. So let's welcome Katie.
Thank you, Carol. Hey, everybody. I cannot believe that Thanksgiving is next week. It's so surreal. But at the same time, I'm really excited about the holidays. And as Carol mentioned, sometimes sleep and stress are impacted, even during the most fun and joyful times of the year. So today we are going to talk all about stress and sleep management, just for an overall healthy lifestyle. Carol did mention there in regards to services that we provide at Lifestyle. I have to say it's been a lot of fun to have people come into the office, although we do offer virtual, so it's fun both ways, seeing someone just in person or virtually that have attended one of the webinars and just getting to meet them and talk to them and help them, counsel them. I love it so much. So, I hope that this does kind of intrigue you guys if you've not, or maybe you've been thinking about making an appointment. Maybe this kind of gets the ball rolling for you. We do work on a variety of things with people, not just weight management. I mean, we work on lots and lots of things. And one of my favorite things to actually talk about with people is sleep and stress management, as they are so, so important to our overall health. So let's get right into it. Just some general facts here. So guys, I'm sure it is not a shock, but to hear the actual amount of people that struggle with sleep or wakefulness disorders, 50 to 70 million Americans, that is a lot. And 30% of Americans are getting fewer than 7 hours of sleep per night. Typically, we recommend anywhere from about 6.5 to 8-ish hours. If you can try to kind of get somewhere in that general ballpark. But as we all know, it's not always the amount of sleep we're getting, it's the quality of sleep that we're getting. So we're going to talk all about that too. Insufficient sleep and insomnia are most prevalent in women. I did not find that shocking, to be quite honest. Sleep is just as important as diet and exercise. And as I mentioned last month when we talked about exercise regularly promotes more sound sleep. If you remember me talking about those immediate benefits of exercise, 2 of the 3 were sleep, aiding with your sleep quality as quickly as that night, and immediate relief with stress. And so anyway, okay, so what affects our sleep? I feel like number one, maybe, I mean, these aren't listed in order of importance here, but I do feel like number one is really important if it's something you've not thought about. A regular sleep schedule. Sometimes we can maybe fall asleep at 9 o'clock one night because we're exhausted and then want to stay up till midnight the next night because our favorite show is on, or we just need some us time when the kids go to bed. So I get it and I understand it, being a mom and just, wanting that time for yourself. However, your body certainly does get really adjusted and enjoys anticipating when you're going to go to sleep. It's almost like that circadian rhythm of when your body is kind of built to understand when it's time for rest. And so trying to go to bed within an hour of, each night within, keeping that range about an hour difference would be ideal. So maybe if that's something you haven't thought about, that's something that you can kind of think through. Your sleeping environment is extremely important. I know, it's not only just how our bedroom is and facilitates sleep. That is important, of course, how hot or cold it is, the way that your comforter and your bedding feels, your pillow, but also how you associate your bedroom with sleep. If your bedroom has become lots of different things for you, for a lot of people, and I'm guilty of it, and my husband certainly is someone who uses it for this, is work. It's become our office as we work at home a lot, and maybe we don't all have a designated office room, so we kind of use what we can. We have a desk in our room, so we use it as an office at times. So you kind of naturally may gravitate towards using your computer if it's in there. Maybe there's a TV in your bedroom. I feel like most people probably have one in there. But watching TV, doing work, we all know these things affect our sleep. Caffeine and alcohol, of course, are going to affect our sleep, whether it's caffeine that keeps you up if you drink it too late in the day, and alcohol, although it might send you off to sleep fairly easily. I had someone bring that up to me the other day, like, actually, it really helps me. And I challenged that with, however, your quality of sleep can be impaired, meaning that when we drink alcohol, it doesn't allow our bodies to get into that deep sleep and to be able to have a restful sleep as long. So that is something to consider if you have alcohol. Even 1 glass, 2 glasses on a nightly basis could affect your sleep. We know diet can affect it, and I'm going to get into some dietary modifications here shortly. It's not always the type of food that affects our diet, or affects our sleep. It's how we eat. For example, if we're eating too late at night, quantity too much, we all know if you struggle with reflux, that's going to trigger that. And so that could be, and reflux, of course, is exacerbated when we lay down and go to bed. And so that's something to always consider. Certain medications could impact someone's sleep. Certain mental health disorders, specifically anxiety or depression, and then sleep disorders themselves, which we're going to talk about here next. So I thought I'd throw out there the most common sleep disorders. Insomnia is most common in older adults. women and those with mental health disorders. So, some people may struggle with insomnia to a lesser degree than others, but in general, if you're finding that, multiple times within a week, you're staying up for, 2+ hours in the night, this is something that you would want to discuss with a healthcare provider and try to get to the root cause of that. Restless leg syndrome affects about 10% of the population. Mostly women, can occur at any age. Maybe you guys have kind of experienced this, but it is not a fun thing to experience. I know that for myself, I noticed this a lot when I was pregnant. So that can definitely come about. Pregnancy can actually, of course, bring about a lot of sleep issues. Sleep apnea. This I found the most interesting. So 9% of the population are said to have sleep apnea. However, so many individuals go undiagnosed. 24 million believed to be undiagnosed, according to the American Medical Association. That's a huge chunk. And then shift work syndrome. So this relates to kind of this, you heard me mention circadian rhythm. So that's when your body is telling you that you desire certain things at a certain time of day. Typically, our body is used to being awake when the sun is up. It likes to go to sleep when the sun goes down. But if we work third shift, we can't really have as much control over that. So it can affect your sleep quality as a result. About 1 in 5 employees are struggling with this, that work these off hours. And the last little tidbit of information on the slide is really important. So there was a review of sleep disorders and sleep deprivation that found that more than 60% of adults have never been asked about the quality of their sleep by a physician, and fewer than 20% have ever initiated such a discussion. As you heard me say, that sleep apnea being one of the more common sleep disorders, 24 million are undiagnosed, it kind of makes sense if we're not having a conversation about it. So I highly encourage you guys after today's presentation, if you kind of feel like you struggle with anything sleep related, to definitely get it checked out. Our clinicians focus on this and are very big advocates for you, getting you into doctors, encouraging you to seek, doctors maybe you've not seen in a while, as it's really important to follow up on stuff like this. And we're going to get into why here in a minute. So how do we know if we're sleeping well? You can do a couple of different things. You can have a personal just evaluation. There's Fitbits and Apple Watches that, of course, can give you lots of detail and information about quality, how much you were awake in the night and whatnot. But maybe we don't have that as an option to look at. So keeping a sleep diary is something that you could do with some questions that you answer that I've listed here. Kind of get a feel, and maybe the first, I was kind of thinking about this, how long does it take to fall asleep? Well, maybe you don't know when you fall asleep, you can't look at it anyway. I think it just kind of gives you this kind of idea of how long am I sitting there awake before I go to bed? Is it longer than 30 minutes? Is it longer than an hour? That would be a problem, I would assume. Maybe 30 minutes is normal, but an hour or more would be on the longer side. How long are you asleep in bed? How often do you wake up, and how long are you awake? Maybe you're evaluating your waking and your daytime habits. These are all things that you would want to take to a medical provider to help them help you to improve your sleep quality. And then, of course, your medical evaluation, which would, consist of a physical exam, of course, but then possibly a sleep study. So that's something that we often will advocate for patients to do if we feel like they are at risk of having an undiagnosed sleep disorder. So these are some symptoms to pay attention to, and I'm sure that they're not, alarming here to read them. It makes sense, but some of your daytime symptoms would be, of course, you're not able to pay attention, concentrate as easily, obviously daytime fatigue, GI symptoms. Sometimes people don't correlate the two. You can certainly have, with both stress and sleep, GI side effects. So, that's something to, put some puzzle pieces together if you've kind of been thinking about, why am I having these GI symptoms all of a sudden? Oh, right. And I'm also stressed and I'm also not sleeping. That could be a connection. Mood disturbances. We all know when we don't get enough sleep, we certainly can act like it, right? And then, of course, headaches are a common symptom as well. And then your nighttime symptoms are obvious, I'm sure, but just trouble getting to sleep, trouble staying asleep, overall poor sleep quality, which you would assess by probably how you feel in the morning, and waking up maybe too early for the day. So understanding these short-term kind of symptoms that you might be having, or in the moment symptoms that you might be having, and addressing them are extremely important. And the reason is, when we look at the list of long-term effects here of insufficient sleep, it can elevate our blood pressure, increase our risk of heart attack, obesity, diabetes. Our immune function is impaired. We do have an increased risk of depression. As Carol mentioned, sleep and stress and depression, they just go hand in hand. And hormone dysregulation, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. So if we look into how sleep and poor sleep affects our ability to metabolize food, we feel like we're having unexplained weight gain. There are direct metabolic effects of insufficient sleep. And the top two there are related to some of that hormone dysregulation that I was just referring to. So there are two hormones that maybe you've never heard of before. Sometimes I'd bring them out in conversation in counseling, and sometimes not. Depends on, the conversation we're having. But so your hunger hormone is called ghrelin, and your fullness hormone is called leptin. And when we have insufficient sleep, we have the reverse of what we want as far as amounts of those hormones in our body. We have increased amounts of our hunger hormone, which I guess you can obviously correlate that with you're hungry more frequently, and decreased amounts of leptin. So we aren't staying full as long. So that right there is a direct relationship between the way we desire food and the way that we sleep at night. We tend to have an increased desire for sweets and carbohydrates, and there could be many reasons behind that. We have an increase in a stress hormone that I'm going to talk about here in a second called cortisol. That right there can heighten your desire for carbohydrates, and I'll explain why in a minute. But also fatigue. Fatigue is something that can make us feel also kind of depressed and maybe anxious, and sometimes emotional eating results from that. So behaviors can actually spur some of these desires for sweets and carbs as well. And then some other metabolic effects is that it just overall decreases our resting metabolic rate. If you were present for the metabolism presentation, I discussed that a bit, but sleep being a direct reason why we might have a slower metabolism. And it increases our risk of insulin resistance, mostly because of our increased amount of cortisol. And I'm going to talk about cortisol here in a second, guys. Okay. So let's talk about food here. This is what I do, right? So I talk about food. I want you to understand why food and sleep are connected. But as far as how to improve that, that's what we do. We help people with that. It's probably not a shocker to see some of the things on this slide. I mean, basically, it's a healthy, well-rounded, balanced diet that's really going to help with sleep, with certain foods to maybe pay a little closer attention to. Making sure you're getting enough fiber is important. Fiber is going to come from fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans, and we don't get enough of fiber in our diet. So that's something that I'm asking people to evaluate a lot, and for a lot of reasons. Fiber is essential for so many things, but sleep, what they're correlating with fiber and sleep specifically is that increased fiber intake is showing more time spent in deep sleep, which I found very interesting. Healthy fat. What we tend to eat more of as a whole in the American diet is saturated fat, which studies have shown to be have predicted to have a lesser amount of deep sleep when we're consuming too much saturated fat. So I'm trying to shift the focus over to healthy fats coming from nuts and seeds and healthy oils and avocado and, nuts and stuff like that that are loaded with lots of different nutrients, but mostly healthy fats that are so good for us. Limiting our added sugar. We tend to have more arousals or abrupt changes from that deeper stage to a lighter stage of sleep when we have too much added sugar in the diet. It doesn't mean you can't have any sweets, but it does mean that we need to pay attention to the amount of those added sugars that we're eating. And then just in general, as I encourage with everybody, protein, carbs, fat, having a balance of these macronutrients and structure within our day so that we're not undernourishing during the daytime and maybe making up for it in the evening. Our food choices change dramatically when we don't eat balanced and structured throughout the day. So I hope people understand the connection between that. And then certain functional foods to consider, because the things I've listed here, kiwi, fish, and almonds, have a boost of melatonin production when eaten. So I think the general gist here with, these functional foods is know that they do help with melatonin production, but also to just sprinkle them into your week somehow. We don't have to go out there and, buy a bag of kiwis and eat 2 to 3 kiwis a day and all of a sudden go overboard with it. But just understand that these are some things to maybe sprinkle into your day, your week, that could potentially have benefits. And then 2 minerals, magnesium and calcium. Research has kind of linked that being deficient in these can affect our sleep. So I would talk to you about how to get more of these into your diet. Magnesium is tough, but as far as a supplement goes, magnesium glycinate is a supplement that I highly recommend for people if you're having sleep and stress. So that's something that I typically recommend as an over-the-counter supplement for a lot of people. Okay. Moving on to some other strategies to consider in addition to, of course, those dietary changes. As I mentioned before, where we sleep is so important. Maintain a sacred space for sleep. Make it inviting. Dim the lights, avoid the screens, have a little sleep routine that you do. Maybe it's 30 minutes before bed. I know on phones you can set that little bedtime alarm to kind of, remind you that you're trying to do this at night. Getting in that exercise, even just 15 minutes a couple times a day. Maybe we're only able to get in 10 to 15 that day. Every little bit does count. Limiting that caffeine, watching the alcohol, and as I mentioned before, maybe keep a sleep diary and utilize that diary with those questions that I had discussed and bring that into your doctor or to us so that we can better understand your sleep habits and you better understand that too. All right, guys, we're going to move on to stress. So, and some more facts here, stress, I want people to understand, is very normal. We cannot have a life without stress. We're meant to go through periods of stress and work through them, and our body is certainly equipped for that. But acute versus chronic stress is very different. Acute stress being, we're having a stressful moment. Maybe we fell and got hurt and our body is trying to, recover, or, we're going through a little bit of stress in that moment. Maybe there's a big project that's due or before presentation, I always get little butterflies. That's a little bit of stress that I have. Very normal. Chronic stress is different. That's when we're in a consistent state of fight or flight. And I'm going to kind of explain what that's doing to your body here in a second. But Americans are 20% more stressed than the global average. 55% of Americans are stressed during the day. 94% of workers report feeling stress at work. I feel work is a huge culprit for a lot of people. And so having a bit more of a work-life balance. Sometimes we feel like we don't have any control over that. But I bet if you really thought about it, you could advocate for yourself a little bit and come up with some things that could, bring you a little bit of relief there. But the highest age range of stress was noted by the American Psychological Association to be between 18 and 34. Not to say you're not stressed beyond that, but I think that's just kind of having you understand this group of individuals tends to have the highest stress, and 62% women versus 51% men. So, okay, let's get into what are some of those health issues related to chronic stress? Very similar to sleep when you look at it: elevated blood pressure, weight gain, digestive issues. We may have chest pain. We all know that sometimes panic attacks can be mistaken, heart attacks can be mistaken for panic attacks. Our immune system is disrupted. Our sleep, of course. Pretty much one of the, I think, bigger culprits of insomnia is anxiety. And so they are heavily linked, anxiety and depression, and even infertility as a result of chronic stress. Okay, so let's talk about that chronic stress and eating patterns. We all know there's a connection, but what is it? And maybe have you thought about it? And it's something that I challenge people to talk about, even if it's, I want people to feel comfortable talking about things, and I'm certainly not a therapist. It's something that I want people to utilize if they feel they do have kind of unmanaged, debilitating stress. But I also want people to understand the connection between how they eat and the stress they're feeling. And a lot of times, when we're stressed, we don't prioritize things in the best way. We're not balancing our time very well because of the stressor. The stressor is causing all of our attention. So we may gravitate towards convenience or processed foods as a result. Going back to that statistic, 94% of people are stressed at work. I talk to so many people who are overwhelmed with their work schedule. There's no time because of work. There's no time to get to the grocery store. There's no time to cook. I do work with people on convenience and having them understand that there is a way, but I also think, again, kind of going back to that work-life balance, trying to figure out, well, this is really important to me. My health is literally declining. What are some things that I can change so that I don't have to rely on fast food every day in order to make ends meet here with eating? Some people go the opposite route. They don't eat, they undernourish, they skip meals, they lose their appetite. And that is a problem as well, of course. And so not getting the nutrients that we need can affect how we sleep. There's lots of different things that of course, would create. Higher caffeine intake, when we're stressed and when we're fatigued, as a result of not sleeping, right? We want more caffeine because we don't feel good. We don't feel awake. We feel tired. So that in turn can actually increase that dreadful hormone that I'm going to talk more about here in a second, cortisol, which can create a lot of issues. We use food as a coping mechanism called emotional eating. I've talked about that before. I'm not demonizing emotional eating at all. To be quite honest, it can be a coping skill. It needs to be managed. I mean, sometimes we just want to get a yummy meal because we know that it's going to bring us joy. But at the same time, is this our only skill? Is that all that we rely on? So that's something that I like to work with people on, is balancing out emotional eating and food as their only coping mechanism. And sugar cravings, of course, are elevated due to cortisol. And as I mentioned before, or maybe I didn't mention, but because I was talking about sleep, but increased cortisol can also increase your ghrelin and decrease in leptin, those hormones with hunger and fullness. Okay, so let's talk about cortisol here for a second so you can understand exactly what's going on in the body and why we're eating more when we're stressed and not sleeping and cortisol is higher. So the role of cortisol is to produce glucose, which is basically sugar, blood sugar, to fight or flee the present stressor that's existing. But what happens when our body thinks we're always stressed out, called chronic stress? Well, we have continuous cortisol production. So what happens is when we feel like, we've got all this glucose kind of floating around in our bloodstream, insulin is working. All of a sudden, it becomes resistant and stops working as efficiently. This equals high blood sugars in the body because insulin is responsible for taking that blood sugar and putting it into your cells to utilize for energy. So if insulin's not doing that, we've got blood sugar floating around in our blood and we're not utilizing it like we should. So those high blood sugars, all of a sudden our cells aren't getting any sugar, right? They're not getting any glucose. They think that they're being dismissed. They feel starved. Starved cells all of a sudden want food. So we're overeating, and we all know that in turn can lead to fat storage when we are eating too much for our body to handle. So emotional eating is certainly a behavior, but it can be a direct result of increased cortisol. And I don't think people realize that. I think people come into the office and they think, I just don't have any willpower. No, you just don't have any stress management going on right now. And that is leading you to eat and desire food very differently than if you were managing your stress differently. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about some dietary modifications here to help reduce stress. So omega-3 fats are just some of the healthiest, most wonderful foods and nutrients that you can consume for a variety of reasons. But one is that they do help to they help your brain utilize serotonin specifically. So that mood boosting hormone is being utilized more efficiently when we have consistent amounts of healthy omega-3 fats on a daily basis. So examples of that would be salmon and walnuts and flax seeds. And so those are just a few. And that's something that we talk about a lot within, of course, your sessions are specific foods, how to get them into your diet, how to work through barriers with getting these foods in the mix. Because I know, it's all about knowing the foods and what to do. Sometimes it's how to get them in throughout the day, working on those strategies. So that's something that we do a lot as well. So tryptophan is an amino acid that is converted into melatonin. So eating these foods rich in this amino acid can help to boost serotonin levels in the body. So again, kind of like the functional foods, talking about the kiwis here. I'm not saying that you just have to have a kiwi egg salmon diet here to, all of a sudden your stress is reduced. It's a lot of different things. These are just things to consider adding in, sprinkling in, giving a try. The key to all of this, as I mentioned before, is balance, variety, eating regular meals, paying attention to how food feels in your body, mindful eating, understanding hunger and fullness and awareness. These are all things that help to improve the ways in which you eat food, but understanding exactly what foods and what foods are going to help with stress, I think, is really important too. One thing that people really don't work on enough, in my opinion, is behavior modification. And so that's something that I specifically like to help with. things like all or none thinking, good versus bad mentality. We gravitate towards this type of thinking when we are stressed, which leads to the emotional eating. So understanding how to channel some of that is important too. Okay. I wanted to give you guys a couple quick things here to try at home. Um, and I like these because, well, this one's really easy to remember, and I feel like the next one is too, but has a little bit more to it. So this is something to help with your emotional eating if it pops up, okay? So think of the word stop. And what you're going to do is, okay, we're stressed out. We just got off a really awful work phone call. We got yelled at. We're at home. There's the pantry. We go to the pantry, we open it up, and we're staring at all the food. And we're like, what are we going to eat right now? Let's stop what we're doing. Let's take a minute of deep breathing. Let's observe, is there physical hunger as I'm staring at these chips? And then let's proceed with awareness. So maybe we decide there's literally no hunger. I still want them. That's okay. I think what we've done here is we've taken a pause, and that's something that I have people think about doing a little bit more often. It's not always just, I can't eat anymore when I'm stressed. I can't. But one thing you can think of is, what can I do just a little bit differently to try to understand the situation a little bit better? And remember when I talked about food not being the only coping mechanism? So that's what we would want to work on is, what am I feeling? What emotion am I feeling? And if it's stress, if it's, I'm tired, what is it that I'm feeling right now? Food most likely isn't going to fix that. It's going to just band-aid it for a minute, but it isn't going to fix it. So what are some things that we can do in addition to having this snack? Or how can we eat this snack? Could we eat this snack sitting down versus standing at the pantry eating the chips, wondering what else we're going to eat next? Could we take it, put it in a bowl, sit at a table and eat it? So those are some things that I work on with people. Okay, the next one is called, see the next slide, the 5Ds. So this is a pretty similar concept, but just laid out a little differently. So maybe you like one versus the other, but this puts a time limit on it. A little bit of a longer time limit. So delay 5 minutes. Maybe we focus on something else. Maybe we've identified the emotion and we're taking it and we're going to do something to help with that emotion. We're tired. Do we have 5 or 10 minutes to lay down and just kind of rest our eyes for a minute? Do we do a light meditation? Do we go sit outside to get some vitamin D to give us a little energy boost? And then we distance ourselves from the food at the same time. Keeping foods out of the house, sometimes that's not an option. It depends on your family and what you're able to do when it comes to that and what foods you like. And I don't always find that that's the end all be all to treat some of this emotional eating, is to just isolate yourself from the food, because that's not really realistic. But maybe keeping it not at hand's reach, not in eye's view. There are certain things that you could kind of do to help kind of make it a little bit easier to distract yourself. And then you determine, is this something that I really want? And as I mentioned before, if you do desire it, eat it mindfully. Kind of understand that you're allowed to eat this food that you're craving in the moment. It isn't that big of a deal. But understanding the emotions behind it and things that we can do to help with that basic emotion other than food, that's what I want to help people understand. All right, guys, so other stress reducing strategies to wrap it up here. Regular exercise, just like I would recommend for sleep, meditation, breathing exercises, huge therapy advocate, but I get that's not something that everyone feels comfortable with. Find your social support, find your group of friends that you feel comfortable talking about, or talking to, excuse me. That work-life balance, of course, as I've mentioned, good sleep hygiene, as I've mentioned, and most importantly, I think, is self-care, things you do that you enjoy doing regularly. Think of some things that you can do that maybe you've not done in a while that you really enjoy. Okay, so So I've got some resources here, guys, handouts that'll be given to you guys. We have lots of handouts at Lifestyle, love them. So I've shared some with you. Some apps to think of for stress and sleep are Headspace, the mindfulness app, Calm, and Insight Timer. They all have free versions. Some have more in-depth versions that you may have to pay for. And then my favorite podcast for meditation, Mindful in Minutes. I absolutely love her. Been using her since the pandemic, and I highly recommend it. She has a lot of specific focuses, specifically related to sleep. So anyway, all right, guys, some references there, and we are going to get right into it with a very yummy bread, homemade pumpkin zucchini bread. And what I like about this is it has very minimal added sugars. I'm going to go through some substitutions that I did. If you have your recipe, or I don't know if anyone ever makes along with me, but I have made some substitutions, so I'm going to mention those to you. The first thing that you will want to do, of course, is have your oven preheated. I, as you probably imagine, have the bread already baked because it takes an hour. I'm not going to actually preheat my oven because after today, I've got to go get my kid and I don't want my oven on and all that. So I'm not going to preheat it, but you want to preheat it to 350 with just a 9x5 kind of bread baking bowl there. And okay, so what we're going to do is start with the first few ingredients here. And let me tell you what I've done. So I've kept the pumpkin, but I've substituted the oil. I'm not going to use canola oil. I'm going to use applesauce. And so I don't know if you guys have ever done that before, but it's a lovely trade. You're saving lots of calories that are just unnecessary. I think the total calorie content for a slice of this, which there's 12 servings per loaf, is 218. And by me substituting a half a cup of oil for a half a cup of unsweetened applesauce, that brought those calories down to 150 a slice. So loved that. It takes away the fat. Okay, it doesn't take away the carbs, it takes away all the fat basically. So there's really no significant amount of fat here. For you guys that are curious, carb-wise, there's about 27 grams of carbohydrate, couple grams of fiber, and then 10 grams of added sugar, or total sugar, sorry, 8 grams of added sugar, which is very good considering pumpkin bread has double that mostly. So anyway, the other thing that I substituted, speaking of sugar, is I'm using coconut sugar instead of regular cane sugar. And coconut sugar has the same amount of calories, the same amount of sugar, so 8 grams of added sugar will remain. But I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but coconut sugar has less of a glycemic response. And what that means is it does not have as much of an impact on your blood sugars as regular sugar does. So really good for anyone who has diabetes. The only thing that I would say with pumpkin bread, or bread really, I mean, I always say this to anyone, no matter if you have diabetes or not, you want to have a balance of macronutrients, and bread alone is not going to do that. So I would add a little bit of healthy fat, maybe a little protein. It would be a lovely accompaniment to breakfast. What I've been doing is having a little slice of it with some eggs, and I even smeared just a little bit of peanut butter on the top of it, and it was really good. You do not have to do that. You could dump some avocado slices on your eggs, or, you know, a little bit of nuts on the side with some berries. But yes, so just wanted to go over those 2 substitutions quickly. All right, let me angle my camera here. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, I'm gonna move my bowl right there. Okay, so the first thing that I have here, we're gonna whisk together a half a cup of pumpkin. And guys, this is just 100% pure pumpkin, not like pumpkin pie filling, just pure pumpkin. Let me get my can real quick so I can show you. Okay, so just 100% pure pumpkin is what you want to look for. So, there's no sugar or anything like that added to it. It's just pumpkin. Okay, so I'm going to add that into the bowl here. Push this out for a second. Questions while I'm kind of getting some of these ingredients together?
Yes, we do have a few.
Okay.
One person said that their PCP, primary care doctor, recommended some sleep hygiene tips like no screens at least an hour before bed and consistent bedtime. And this person stopped watching TV by 9 with a 10 o'clock p.m. bedtime. And she tried this for over 2 weeks and found that it didn't help. So she started watching TV again before bed and was able to fall asleep quickly. Does it take longer than a couple of weeks to change a bedtime routine?
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I would say you're habitually used to needing the TV to go to sleep. Think about how much of a learned behavior that may be. And so, yeah, I would certainly. So again, it's kind of like alcohol. All right. I mean, different in a way, but maybe I would have to check the exact mechanism here of what's going on with the screens. But the thing is, it may help you fall asleep, but that distraction and that kind of whatever material you're watching, some people literally don't even watch it. They just need to hear something. So one thing I've recommended in the past is try a podcast. Try listening. Sometimes people just need to hear something to go to bed because they hear the TV. I told someone this the other day, and I make fun of her. She's one of my best friends, so I feel like I can make fun of her at this point. But she used to watch Home Alone every night to go to sleep. I used to live with her in college, and my gosh, I would hear Home Alone on, and I was like, are we serious here? It's July. So she would watch Home Alone every night, but she wouldn't watch it. She would just listen to it. So anyway, I recommend trying something else. And there's lots of other things that you could be doing and other underlying issues that may be going on. So I would say that needs to be unpacked a little bit more. But don't give up. Yeah. Try some of the other things that I've mentioned today too. The magnesium glycinate, maybe try, So real quick, guys, I'm going to add in a half a cup of applesauce to the pumpkin. So what's lovely is if you have children that like unsweetened applesauce, you can just take one of their little applesauce cups and dump it in. So you don't even need to measure it. It's about a half cup, or exactly a half cup, because I did measure it one day. But so you're going to add that in. We're going to add in our sugar. And remember, guys, the applesauce was in place of the oil. We're going to add in a half a cup of our coconut sugar. Coconut sugar is brown and it has a bit more of a caramelized flavor to it. It certainly goes well with breads and baked goods because of that reason. So I'm going to add that in, half a cup. And then I'm going to add in 2 eggs. Okay, so I've already whisked my eggs together, 2 eggs. All right, and then I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla. All right, so 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and then I'm going to whisk that together. Okay, what other questions do I have?
Can anything be done about urinary frequency if there is no medical issue? It's destroyed this person's sleep.
That is a really good question. So, that's something that I feel like a lot of people struggle with, is getting up in the night to go to the bathroom. And there's a lot to consider here. And I can give you a very general answer, but to get more specific and to unpack that more, you may need a little bit more, ears involved, myself, clinician, whoever, if you've had your doctor. But I know you're saying that there's no medical issue involved, but, post children, I'm not sure if this is what's happening, but post kids, I don't know if this is a female or not, but it could be helpful information anyway. Post children, the muscles are different and we go to the bathroom a whole lot more at night sometimes, not everyone, but occasionally. So doing some pelvic floor exercises can help with that. So that could be something to consider. if you're a female. Now for males, I'm not sure. But yeah, so that's just something that's coming to the top of my head.
I think stopping drinking a little earlier,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
any fluids, like we do with our children,
Definitely. Yes, thank you, Carol.
is a good one.
100%. Yeah. You don't want to, if you have any issues going to the bathroom at night, you do not want to be drinking past like 6 o'clock, a few hours before bed. I would just cut that out completely. Try to get all your fluids in, the day, or excuse me, like the beginning and the middle of the day. All right, guys, so let me show you how I'm going to do the zucchini here real quick. So it's calling for, after you mix all the wet ingredients together, to fold in the zucchini. So the zucchini, I've kind of grated it finely here, but I wanted to show you how to grate it. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting the tips off of the zucchini here. I've got my grater and my bowl. Okay, can we see that? And we're just going to take the end and we're just going to grate. All right, and it calls for 1 3/4 cup of zucchini, so lots of zucchini. This particular pumpkin bread is very, very moist, and it's loaded with veggies, with the pumpkin and with the zucchini. Okay, so I'm gonna put that over to the side for a second. So you can see there, it just kind of grates it up really nicely. And this is my 3/4 cup. Need just a smidge more. So I'll do that. And then you're just going to fold this zucchini into your wet ingredients. Okay. All right, so I'm going to bring my wet ingredients over here. Bear with me for 1 second. I need to get my... Okay, so folding, you're basically just going to kind of, fold it in like this. All right, just basically mixing, but just kind of evenly getting it in there. All right, so we've got all of our wet ingredients, and then we've got our zucchini. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to fold in some all-purpose flour. I have a cup of all-purpose flour. Let me mention you can use gluten-free, but personally, I would look up a gluten-free pumpkin bread recipe. There's things to consider if using gluten-free, like for instance, gluten-free flour absorbs more liquid. So you might need more leavening or agents that kind of rise and make it rise well, like baking powder. You might need more fluids as a result, like specifically eggs that kind of add moisture and also kind of hold the product together. So those are things to consider that a gluten-free recipe would go ahead and already have taken care of, but you can easily convert this to gluten-free. All right, so I'm going to add in, fold in all-purpose flour. I'm also going to add in pastry flour, guys. So if you're in the store and you're like, I have all-purpose flour, but I don't have pastry flour. One thing to look for is you can get pastry flour online, but you can also get it at the store. It's just called white whole wheat flour, okay? And I didn't realize that because I didn't have any pastry flour and I was looking for pastry flour, but it is the same thing. And basically it just adds a light and fluffiness in addition with the combo of the all-purpose flour. So it's helpful for kind of a moister product.
Katie,
yeah.
What about just plain whole wheat flour?
You can use whole wheat flour, but I think the pastry flour you'll have a different product if you don't use the pastry flour. I don't think it would be as fluffy, as moist and fluffy. Okay, so I've got those 2 flours that are in here. We're going to add in your pumpkin pie spice, which is about 1.5 tablespoons. I increased it because I thought it could use a little bit more. So about 1.5 tablespoons of pumpkin pie spice. And then we've got a combination, we've got a teaspoon of baking soda and a teaspoon of baking powder. So just, these are all things, guys, you probably have in the house. I know baking can seem overwhelming sometimes, but 'tis the season, right? We have some time off of work. Maybe you've been thinking about trying a new recipe. This is a fun one to try. And this is a half a teaspoon of salt. So all I'm going to do, you do not need a mixer for this. Yay. I mean, does anyone else have the KitchenAid mixer that they registered for their wedding and they use it once a year? Well, you don't even need it for this. So you can keep it tucked away and just kind of use a spatula to fold this in slowly. Okay, I can answer another question or two before I pour it in the pan.
Let's see. Can you use butternut squash?
Sure.
And cake flour.
And cake flour?
I would think cake flour is the same as.
I would think as the pastry flour.
Pastry.
Yeah, I would have to, you know, I think so.
Okay.
But definitely the butternut squash. You can use any grated vegetable you would like. You could do carrots. You could do, yeah, the butternut squash. That's a great one. All right, guys, it's almost mixed in, but I just want to make sure.
Katie, is it a good idea to try to minimize light sleep, or is that also important?
I think all stages of sleep are important. But as far as the specifics, as far as how much to get into each, I don't know if people are, I think we need to just not try to micromanage it so hard sometimes. I feel like we just need to take a peek at, like I mentioned, things that we need to do slightly differently that we're not doing and see if we can focus on that first. And then, you know, if you go to your doctor, you're still not, I mean, I just feel like that's kind of a bit challenging to kind of focus in on like the, you know, but again, I don't know. I'm not an expert here, but I feel like some of the tips that I've mentioned, I think are good places to start just with overall quality of your sleep.
Okay.
Not paying attention to the, yeah.
And we've had a couple of questions about how much magnesium glycinate you should take to try and help sleep at night.
Let me get it for you real quick, and I'll show you guys the brand, and then I'll pop this in and show you what the pumpkin bread looks like, okay?
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so this is one brand that I like, and quite a bit of us recommend this Pure Encapsulations. So this is magnesium glycinate. I just got this off Amazon. They're 120 milligrams in each capsule. I would say start with one 30 minutes before bedtime. If you don't notice really much of a difference, I think you could do two. We can have up to over 400 milligrams of magnesium in a day, and 50 to 60% of us are deficient. So having extra magnesium, especially if we're stressed, as I mentioned. So we deplete magnesium through the urine when we're stressed out. So I don't know that I mentioned that, but we do. And so an extra caffeine intake can impair magnesium as well, which we tend to drink more of when we're fatigued and stressed. So with that said, yeah, start with one and then gravitate towards maybe two if you're not noticing a difference, and I would start there.
Okay, great.
All right, guys, I'm going to plop this in, put the toppings on. Whoops. I'm noticing a little bit that needs to be mixed up here at the bottom. Okay, there we go. All righty. Okay, so let me lean this down, just kind of spread it out, and then I'm going to show you what I'm going to put on top, which makes it very, very yummy and a nice little added nutrient bonus. when you have all the ingredients kind of laid out, ready to go, it really goes fast. So it's really just getting all the things out and doing it that makes baking kind of overwhelming. So I'm going to add in a little bit of pecans and a little bit of pumpkin seeds just for a nice little healthy fat bonus. So I'm basically just kind of sprinkling some of these over the top. All right, same with these pecans. All right, so there it is, undone. You put it in the oven for an hour at 350, and then you have this, which is so, so good. So that's kind of what it looks like with the nuts on the top, if you can see. This is about what a slice thickness would look like, about 150 calories. Like I said, I've been enjoying this so much lately. I've had it with my breakfast most mornings over the past week with some eggs and what did I do along with it this morning? A little bit of kind of guac on my eggs, and then I had this on the side. So very tasty and very low sugar. Yeah. So did everyone see that okay?
Yes, it is beautiful.
Okay, good, good. Perfect. I know we're kind of out of time. Was there one last question if anyone had?
Yes, this goes more for the best way to wake up, but this person uses the alarm on her phone.
Okay.
His or her phone. Is this the best way to wake up, or does the way you wake up matter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think you just kind of think about it and it's like, do you want to be woken up by this awful alarm sound? I mean, I've heard some really terrible ones out there. Or do you need something that's going to jolt you awake, or do you want to slowly wake up? So everyone, I don't know that there's this perfect strategy. I think you just need to feel out what feels good to you. I know for me, it's a soft alarm that happens with, maybe like a 5-minute pause and then it, comes on again. So I'm just kind of like a slow but steady riser. There are some alarms that are just beep, beep, and you're just like, I don't know, that wouldn't work well for me. But yes, the phone alarm is fine. I think just kind of strategize the time in which you set it and the length of time it takes you to get up. I think that could be a strategy. Too many pauses to wake up is maybe not as ideal, but so anyway, I don't know if that
Okay,
helped or not, but
absolutely. Well, thank you all for coming. We almost had 600 people today, which is wonderful.
good.
In December, we are going to do healthy eating tips for the holidays. It is on December 12th. So you all can go to our Worksite Wellness webinar page and sign up, or you will also receive a link through email. And as you all know, we will be sending out the recipe as well as the PowerPoint and any of the handouts. So thank you so much, Katie,
You're
and
welcome.
everyone who attended.
Yes,
We'll
thank you
see you
guys.
December 12th.
Yes,
Have a
happy
great,
Thanksgiving.
great rest of the week, and happy
Yes.
Thanksgiving to everyone.
All right, bye.
Bye.